A day ago, you watched EvadneY Murray walk into Dunmere Lennox with ink on her fingers and a lie she had not yet told. You watched Reginald Thorne search for a woman he had already found. You watched two people spend weeks 12 feet apart, not knowing. In part one, we left them there, 12 feet away, neither one knowing. In part two, the truth comes out. All of it. The question you're going to be asking yourself for the next 8 minutes is not whether he forgives her. It is, what was he beginning to say before he stopped himself? You already know the answer. You just need him to say it. The summons came at 9 o'clock precisely, not through the head clerk, not a formal note, a single knock on the connecting door, measured, unhurried, and then his voice, carrying through the wood with its usual effortless authority. Miss Murray, when you are ready. She was ready. She was absolutely not ready. She gathered her notebook. She straightened the already straight pen on her already straight desk. She stood. She smoothed her skirt with the hands of a woman who needed something to do that was not thinking about what "when you are ready" meant coming from a man who had spent the entire weekend doing something she could feel in the particular quality of the silence behind that door. "He knows," said the part of her that had been saying this since Friday. "You do not know that he knows," said the sensible part. "He summoned you at 9 o'clock precisely on a Monday morning. He summons you regularly. He said, 'When you are ready.' He never says, 'When you are ready.'" She went through the connecting door. He was at his desk, not the Hartley ledgers, not the Pemberton account, not anything she recognized as ordinary Monday morning business. The Abernathy ledgers, all of them, spread across the mahogany in careful, deliberate order, his handwriting in the margins. Small, precise, the annotations of a man who had given his entire weekend to a question that had not answered itself to his satisfaction. She sat down in the chair across from him. She folded her hands in her lap. She looked at those ledgers and felt the floor become uncertain beneath her feet. "Miss Murray," he said, without looking up, "I want to explain something before I ask you anything." She waited. "My father's call on Friday." He set down his pen. He was not pleased with the Abernathy matter, with my handling of it. He has concerns about my judgment, and he expressed those concerns at some length. A pause. The careful pause of a man who has spent a weekend with his father's voice still in his head and has decided exactly how much of that he is going to allow into this room. Which meant I spent my weekend going back through everything. "Yes, sir." Her voice was perfectly steady. She was very proud of her voice. "Abernathy has been with this firm for over 30 years, he said. His record was without fault. His references impeccable. A man like that does not simply begin stealing in his final years without reason. He turned a page. I could not make it add up. "No, sir," she said, still steady. "So I pulled his original documents." He turned the ledger to face her. His correspondence, every signature on record, and I examined them carefully. He looked up. The direct, complete attention of a man who, when he finally looked at you entirely, under proper light, without the pressure of a full day's work behind me. She looked at the page he had turned to face her. She knew what she was going to see. "The signatures," he said quietly, "do not match." The floor tilted. Not conclusively, not to a casual eye. They are close, extraordinarily close, but they are not the same hand. He leaned forward slightly, which means someone went to considerable trouble to make them appear as though they were. She said nothing. "Which means," he said, "that Abernathy did not do this." She said nothing. "Which means," he said very carefully, "that someone else did." The room was very quiet. "Now," he folded his hands on the desk, "I'm going to ask you something directly, Miss Murray, and I want you to understand that I'm asking because you are the most thorough person in this building, and your answer matters to this investigation." "Of course, sir," she said. Her voice was still steady. She hated her voice. "You examined these signatures yourself," he said. "You are the one who confirmed the match. You've been working alongside Abernathy's records for weeks. His handwriting, his notations, his signature appearing on documents every single working day. Yes, sir, you know his hand better than anyone in this firm, better than I do. Yes, sir, and yet the match you confirmed," he paused, "was not a match." The silence that followed was the loudest thing she had ever heard. "She said. "I intend to find out," he said. who's been forging Abernathy's signature. And when I do, it was my fault. The words arrived before she had finished deciding to say them. Not I made a mistake. Not I missed something. It was my fault. Because that was the truth. Not the version he was hearing. Her version. The real one. The one that had been sitting in her chest since the moment she pressed her pen to that page and made a choice she could not unmake. I can explain, she started, but her voice had stopped working. Not from composure failing, from the sheer accumulated weight of weeks and weeks of holding everything in place. Her father's medicine, the thin, polite envelopes, the careful, invisible competence, all of it arriving at once. Without permission, without warning, in the executive suite of Dunmere Lennox at 9:15 on a Monday morning. She was on her feet. She did not remember standing. Her knees found the floor. She pressed her hands together in front of her. Not quite prayer, but the gesture her grandmother had taught her for when words were not enough, and the thing you had done was too large for sentences and required your whole body to carry the weight of it. "Please forgive me," she said. "Please. I can explain. Please, sir. Please forgive me." She was crying, properly, entirely. The kind of crying that does not ask permission and cannot be reasoned with. The kind that has been waiting behind weeks of precision and correctness. And I'm quite well, thank you, and has finally, without warning, found a door left unlocked. Silence. Then, oh, his voice. Right beside her, not above her. She heard him stand. She heard him come around the desk. Not the measured, unhurried movement of a man conducting a professional meeting, but something quicker, something that had made a decision before it had finished making it. And then he was beside her, not standing above her, beside her, down at her level, on the floor of his own executive suite, without a single thought for what that meant for his trousers, or his dignity, or the glass-paneled door through which anyone might walk at any moment. The voice of a man who has walked into a room expecting one thing and found something so completely different that his whole chest has rearranged itself around it. "Oh, no, Miss Murray. Please," she said into her hands. "Please, I can explain. It is not... Please, just let me..." "Shh." The word stopped her entirely. Not sharp, not dismissive, low and deliberate, and meant the sound beneath the sound of a man who has just discovered, without warning, that he cannot bear this. "Shh," he said again. "Come now, up, please." His hands closed around her arms, careful, certain. The hands of a man who had made a decision before his mind had finished making it. "I have you," he said. "Come up." He lifted her. And then she was against his chest, one arm around her shoulders, his other hand moving. She felt this arrive and could not unfeel it, so to the back of her head, his palm warm and steady against her hair, the unhurried, deliberate comfort of a man who had decided, somewhere in the space between her knees hitting the floor and his own following, that she was not going to stay down there. She was still trying to speak. "I can explain. Please, if you will just let me. It is not what you..." "Shh." His arm tightened slightly around her. "Shh. Stop. Just stop for a moment." She stopped. "Good," he said quietly. "Good." He rubbed her hair. Once, twice. The slow, deliberate comfort of a man who was not thinking about what he was doing and would have stopped immediately if he had been thinking about it and was therefore, mercifully, not thinking about it at all. "Listen to me," he said, into her hair. His voice doing something she had never heard it do. Careful at the edges, almost unsteady, the voice of a man holding his composure at a cost he had not anticipated and was not entirely managing. "Whatever you think you need to explain, it can wait. Do you hear me?" She could not speak. "The signatures were close," he said. "Extraordinarily close. Whoever did this was careful, deliberate. They went to considerable trouble." A pause. This was not a simple thing to catch. This was not... His arm tightened again. The small, involuntary movement of someone whose body has made a decision independently of their mind. Good heavens, why are you crying like this? Not a rebuke. The genuine, bewildered distress of a man who had not known until this moment that he could not bear it. Who had discovered, on the floor of his own executive suite on a Monday morning, a fact about himself that had no filing system and no sensible place in the life of a man with a firm to run and a father with opinions and everything that was correct and expected and already arranged. He could not bear her tears. That was simply the truth of it. "You're all right," he said, low, certain, the voice dropping to something quieter than she had ever heard from him. "You are quite all right. I have you." She pressed her face against his chest, and inside her chest, he was not saying what she had thought he was saying. He was not saying, "I know it was you." He was saying someone deceived you. He was saying this was not your fault. He thought she was crying because she had missed it, because she had confirmed a match that was not a match, and a man had lost his position, and she had not caught it, and she was devastated by her own professional failure. That was what he thought. That was not what had happened. "He does not know," said the voice that had been screaming since Friday. Quieter now, not screaming, just present, sitting down beside her in the particular way of a truth that has been running very fast and has finally caught its breath. "He does not know it was deliberate. He does not know it was you." Relief arrived so suddenly it made her dizzy, and then immediately underneath the relief, "I will find out who did this," he had said. "I will find who has been forging Abernathy's signature." She closed her eyes. He was going to keep looking. He was thorough. He had told her himself, "I am thorough, if nothing else." And she had believed him then, and she believed him now, and he was going to keep pulling this thread, and the thread led directly back to her, and she was standing against his chest right now, being comforted for something she had done deliberately, and she could not tell him. "Can you?" said the voice that was not Sebastian's, and not sensible, and had no interest in being either. "Right now, right here. His hand is in your hair. Step back and say, 'Sir, it was not a mistake. I did it deliberately. I knew exactly what I was doing. I am the person you are looking for.'" She thought about her father. She thought about the medicine. She thought about the thin, polite envelope stacked in her drawer. She thought about this man's hand in her hair. She said nothing. "You are so small," he said quietly. Not to her, not quite to himself. The half-voiced observation of a man thinking something out loud that he had not meant to say out loud. His hand stilling briefly in her hair as though surprised by his own voice. She felt those words land somewhere they had absolutely no business landing. "I will get to the bottom of this," he said, his voice finding its professional ground again. Steadier, the composure returning the way tide returns, inevitable, unhurried. "I will find who did this, and I will clear Abernathy's name, and I will make this right." "Yes, sir," she said, very quietly. Into his chest, the two most dishonest words she had ever spoken. He rubbed her hair one final time. Then his hand stilled. She felt him notice, felt the precise moment his practical mind arrived at the scene and found it rather different from what it had intended, and stepped back before he had to ask her to. One step, two. The cold air of the office arriving between them with the depressing efficiency of everything that was true and could not be argued with. She looked at the floor. He cleared his throat. The small, controlled sound. The composure returning to its post. "I apologize," he said, his voice entirely even. "That was—" "No," she said quickly. "Please, you were—" "Thank you, sir." A pause. "Are you—" "Quite well," she said. "Yes, thank you." She looked up. He was looking at her with the expression she had seen for one unguarded second before the mask came back down. Open, uncertain, the face of a man who has done something without deciding to and has found, to his considerable inconvenience, that he doesn't regret it. Then the mask, fully, all at once. "Your position is not in question," he said. "Whatever I find, that stands." "Yes, sir. You may go back to your desk." "Yes, sir." She went through the connecting door. She sat down. She pressed both hands flat on the mahogany and looked at them. Her ink-stained fingers, her hands that had matched those signatures and written confirmed in the margin and started all of this. "He does not know," said the voice, still quiet, still present. "He does not know yet. Yet." She picked up her pen. She put it down. She picked it up again, and behind the connecting door, which had not closed fully, which had never once closed fully since the first morning upstairs, Reginald Thorne stood at his window and did not move for a very long time. He was thinking about the investigation. He was thinking about Abernathy. He was thinking about his father's voice still in his head from Friday, and the weekend he had spent going through ledgers and the thread he was going to pull until he found the end of it. He was thinking about all of that. "You're so small," said his mind quietly. He looked at the connecting door. He looked at the window. He went back to his desk, but the connecting door stayed open. and on her side of it, her pen moving across her ledger with hands that were not quite steady, her face composed, her figures correct, EvadneY Murray was becoming very good at knowing things she absolutely could not say, and living with the weight of all of them.
Not a name, not yet a face, only what could be.
It is Tuesday morning. She arrived to find her tea already waiting, steaming, precisely as she took it, the particular strength she had mentioned once in passing to no one in particular, and yet here it was, every morning since he had arrived, at the exact temperature of something that had been made not too long ago and not too recently, as though someone had calculated, from some unknowable distance, the exact moment she would sit down. She did not think about that. She was not going to think about that. "Good morning, Mr. Thorne," she said, at the connecting door. He looked up. "Good morning, Miss Murray," he said, his face normal, unreadable, not cold, not warm, simply Reginald, the particular expression of a man who was filed yesterday under the appropriate heading and returned to work. She sat at her desk. She put her hands on the keys. She began to type. 2 hours passed. He had not called her. This was unusual. In the weeks since she had moved upstairs, he had called her an average of 3 times before 11 o'clock, sometimes more. The Hartley papers, the Pemberton correspondence, the Northern configuration. Something always needed her attention before the morning was half finished. Today, nothing. The connecting door was open. She could hear him, the occasional turn of a page, the quiet, deliberate scratch of his pen, the particular silence of a man in deep, concentrated work. He was there. He simply had not called her. "He is busy," said the sensible voice. "He is investigating. He has his father's expectations pressing down on him from above and an innocent man's reputation to restore from below and a firm to run in the middle of all of it. He does not need you every 5 minutes. He always needs me every 5 minutes," said the other voice. "That is an exaggeration. 3 times before 11, every day, without fail, until today. Today is different." "Yes," said the voice, very quietly. "It is." She made herself busy. She cross-referenced the Pemberton ledger. She typed 2 letters that did not urgently need typing. She found a discrepancy in the March accounts that had been sitting unnoticed since March and experienced none of the usual satisfaction of finding it. She glanced at the connecting door. His head was down. She looked back at her ledger. "Should you resign?" said the voice that had been asking this since Friday. "Before he finds out, before he pulls the thread all the way back to you. You could write the letter today. You could leave it on his desk. You could be gone before—" "Gone where?" said the sensible voice flatly. "To which of the counting houses that sent you a thin, polite envelope? To which firm from Mayfair to the docks that has no use for a girl of limited experience without a satisfactory character reference?" She pressed her pen to the paper. "This is the only door," said the sensible voice. "You know it is the only door." She knew. She typed. The tea instinct arrived at 11:30. She should bring him tea. She dismissed it immediately. He was the one who had been ensuring she had tea every morning since he arrived. He had people for that. He knew exactly how to procure tea in his own building without any assistance from his clerk. He had been doing precisely that since the first morning upstairs, and the idea of her walking through that connecting door with a cup and saucer was ridiculous. She was not going to do that. She looked at the connecting door. His head was still down. She looked back at her ledger. Is it not, she thought, with the particular irritation of a woman arguing with herself at 11:30 on a Tuesday morning, scientifically correct for the heart and the mind to be doing the same thing? Should they not, by any reasonable measure, be in agreement? They were not in agreement. Her mind was saying, figures, ledger, Pemberton, March discrepancy, stay at your desk, do your work. Do not think about yesterday. Do not think about the connecting door. Do not think about... Her heart was saying something else entirely. Something she was not going to write down even in the private shorthand of her own thoughts. She made herself busy. She was becoming very good at making herself busy. She could swear she heard him say her name. She looked up. The connecting door. Open. Silent. His head bent over his work exactly as it had been for the past 2 hours. He had not said her name. Her mind had invented it. The particular cruelty of being so accustomed to something that when it did not happen, the brain manufactured it anyway. A ghost of a summons, arriving at exactly the frequency she had been trained to expect, and then dissolving into nothing. She looked back at her ledger. "Miss Murray," said her mind, in his voice with his particular carrying quality. "Stop that," she told it. It did not stop. The telephone rang at 2:30. She was not going to eavesdrop. Her grandmother had been extremely clear on the subject of eavesdropping. It was not done. It was not the behavior of a woman of good character. It was the kind of thing that led to knowing things you had no business knowing and then having to decide what to do with them, which was invariably worse than not knowing in the first place. She was not going to eavesdrop. She heard him pick up the receiver. She kept her eyes on her ledger. "Yes," he said. She turned a page. "I see," he said. She made a note in the margin. A pause, longer than a usual pause. The particular quality of a silence on a telephone call where the other person is saying something that requires the full attention of a man who gives everything his full attention and is giving this considerably more. "Why?" he said. She pressed her pen to the paper. "Wedding," she heard. She did not look up. "Are you certain," he said, "that you are making the right choice?" She made another note. The note was not about anything in the ledger. She crossed it out. "What about father?" he said. "What about your family?" She looked at the connecting door. Just once, just for a second. His head was bent. His shoulders, she had been studying those shoulders for weeks without meaning to, and she could read them the way she read figures, the way she read a room. His shoulders were doing something she had not seen them do before. Not the controlled set of a man managing a professional difficulty. Something more personal than that. Something that had arrived through a telephone line from Paris and settled across him like weather. She looked back at her ledger. "It is the wedding," she told herself. "Elawan is coming back. He is nervous. That is what this is. A man who is about to be married, feeling the weight of it, arriving all at once on a Tuesday afternoon." She believed this. She was going to keep believing this. She made herself believe this for the remainder of the afternoon. Strange men began arriving at his office at 4:00. She did not know them. They did not come through her door. They went directly to his, quietly, purposefully. The particular movement of men who had been summoned for a specific reason and knew what it was. The investigation. He was pulling threads. She had known he would. She had been waiting for it. She kept her head down. At 4:30 he went downstairs himself. She heard his footsteps in the corridor. That particular quality of stillness in motion, the way he moved through a space. And then nothing. She did not look up. She did her work. She did not think about threads. At 5:00 she went downstairs to find Mabel Cartwright. Mabel was at her usual desk at the end of the second row, her hat slightly crooked in the way it always was by 5:00. Her pen moving across her ledger with the cheerful efficiency of a woman who genuinely enjoyed figures and had never once pretended otherwise. She looked up when she saw Evadne, and her face did the thing it always did. The immediate, warm, particular brightness of someone who is simply glad to see you. "There you are," said Mabel. "I was beginning to think the executive wing had swallowed you whole." "Not yet," said Evadne. They went to the corner place, the small one 2 streets over, with the good scones and the window seat and the proprietress who never rushed anyone. They had not been in 3 weeks. The proprietress brought their usual order without being asked, and Evadne sat across from Mabel Cartwright and felt, for the first time all day, that she could breathe. "How is it?" said Mabel. "Up there." "Fine," said Evadne. "It is fine." Mabel looked at her with the expression of a woman who has known someone long enough to know the difference between fine and fine. "Truly," said Evadne. "My position is secure. The work is interesting. I am managing." She was not managing. She was sitting in a corner tea shop telling her best friend everything was fine while her employer investigated a forgery she had committed deliberately, and she thought she was fairly certain. She was fairly certain she was. "You look tired," said Mabel. "I'm always tired," said Evadne. "This is a different kind of tired." "Mabel, I'm only saying." "I know what you are only saying," said Evadne, "and I'm telling you I'm fine." Mabel looked at her scone. "Is he terrible?" she said. "Mr. Thorne, is he as bad as everyone says?" Evadne thought about a man coming around his desk without thinking. A man on his knees on the floor of his own executive suite, a hand in her hair. "You're so small." A connecting door that had not closed fully since the first morning upstairs. He is, she said. No, he is not terrible. Mabel raised an eyebrow. He is very professional, said Evadne firmly. That is all I mean. He is a very professional employer. Mabel looked at her with a particular expression of a woman who has filed something away for later and intends to return to it. She did not return to it. Not immediately. She picked up her scone and broke it in half with the decisive efficiency of a woman changing the subject on her own terms and said, My aunt has been asked to help at the Royal Opera House. Evadne looked up. Preparation work, said Mabel. They are getting ready for the new season. Cleaning, setting things in order, that sort of thing. She will be there on and off for the next month or so. She added butter to her scone with considerable attention. She said I could come along one afternoon and have a look around while she works. Slip into the back and watch some of the rehearsals. She looked up. I have never been inside. Can you imagine? All those years in London and I have never once set foot in the place. Evadne said nothing. You could come, said Mabel, if you wanted. The rehearsals are apparently quite something. The singers warming up, the orchestra finding their way through something new. My aunt says it is like watching a whole world being built from the beginning. She tilted her head. You would like it, I think. You always like that sort of thing. Evadne looked at her tea. The Royal Opera House. The dark. The particular darkness of a place that was grand and public and yet could contain, in its velvet alcoves, something entirely private. A collision in the wrong place at the wrong time. Cedar and salt air. 30 seconds she had been trying to file away since October and had not yet managed to file. Perhaps, she said. I will let you know the date when my aunt confirms it. Yes, said Evadne. Do. She picked up her cup. She took a sip. She was not thinking about the opera house. She was absolutely thinking about the opera house. Mabel, mercifully, had moved on to the subject of the head clerk's inexplicable new hat. Evadne let her. They talked about everything except the things Evadne was not talking about. It was, on balance, the best 40 minutes of her day. She returned to find him still in his office. The strange men had gone. The building had emptied itself of everyone except the necessary few. The lamps were lit against the early evening, and the quiet of the upper floor had taken on the particular quality it always had after hours. Heavier, somehow, more honest, the way a room feels when it has stopped performing for an audience. She sat at her desk. She looked at the connecting door. He was still there. She could hear him. The occasional movement. The weight of a man who had been in that office since before she arrived this morning and had no apparent intention of leaving. She gathered her things. She should go home. His car was there. It was always there. The driver waiting with the particular patient stillness of a man who had been waiting for her every evening for weeks and had never once made her feel the inconvenience of it. She stood. She glanced through the connecting door, and she saw his face. Not directly, not with the full attention of a woman looking at a man she was not supposed to be looking at. With the peripheral precision of someone who had been studying a particular view for weeks and could read it without appearing to read it at all. He looked worse than this morning. The jaw set against something that had nothing to do with ledgers or investigations or threads being pulled. The particular stillness of a man holding himself together at a cost that was visible, if you knew where to look, in the exact set of his shoulders and the way his hands were not moving on the desk, even though his eyes were on the papers. She set her things back down. She sat back down. She was not going home yet, but first she went downstairs. She found the driver. She told him she would be running late and not to wait. He nodded. She thanked him, and she thought of her father and felt the familiar pull of guilt and then remembered her aunt, her father's sister, visiting from Brixton, sitting in the parlor right now with her loud opinions and her strong tea and her absolute determination to feed everyone within arm's reach. Her father was not alone tonight. She went back upstairs. She sat at her desk. She looked at the connecting door. She looked at the clock. She looked at her ledger. She looked at the connecting door. You are not going in there, said the sensible voice. I know, she said. It is not your place. I know. He is your employer. Whatever you think you saw on his face is none of your... I know, she said. She looked at her ledger. She looked at the clock. 7:30. She stood up. She went to the small table by the window where the tea things were kept. She made the tea herself. She had absolutely no professional reason to do this. She did it anyway. Because she was 23 years old and he had been hurting on the other side of that door for 6 hours, and she could not sit still any longer, and the tea was the only excuse she had, and she was taking it. She picked up the cup. She stood at the connecting door. She knocked. "Come." She went in. He was at his desk, his coat off, shirt sleeves, the lamp burning low against the evening outside the tall windows. He looked up with the expression of a man expecting documents and found her instead, standing in his doorway with a cup of tea and the straightest spine she owned and an expression of professional composure that was doing its absolute best under the circumstances. "I thought you might want tea, sir," she said. "You have not. That is," she pressed on, "it has been a long day." He looked at her. He looked at the tea. "Thank you, Miss Murray," he said. He took it. She stood there. She was not moving. He looked at his papers. She was still there. He looked up again. She was looking at him with the expression of a woman who had carried out the brave part of the plan and had absolutely nothing prepared for what came after the brave part. He waited. She waited. The clock ticked. "Is there something else?" he said. There was something else. There were approximately 17 something elses. None of them were things she could say out loud in the executive suite of Dunmere Lennox at 7:30 on a Tuesday evening to a man who was her employer and had said exactly 4 words to her since yesterday morning. She looked at him. He looked at her. He still looked like ice. Not the terrible ice of the early weeks. The other kind. The kind that has something underneath it that it is not going to show you without considerable persuasion. And then, because she was EvadneY Murray, and she was 23 and her grandmother's voice arrived at the most inconvenient possible moments without apology. "My grandmother," she said, "used to say that if you smile twice daily, you will live over 100. He looked at her. The full, complete attention of a man who has received information and is processing it with absolute seriousness. "Is that so?" he said. "Yes," she said. A pause. "Where is your grandmother now, Miss Murray?" She opened her mouth. She closed it. She pressed her lips together. A pause. "She passed, sir." He looked at her for one long, careful moment. "Did she live to 100? The silence lasted exactly long enough for her to understand what had just happened. Then she laughed. She did not mean to. It arrived without permission. The small, helpless laugh of a woman who has walked directly into something and has no one to blame but herself and possibly her grandmother. And once it arrived, it brought a friend, and then another, and suddenly she was laughing properly, her hand over her mouth, her eyes bright, in the executive suite of Dunmere Lennox at 7:30 on a Tuesday evening. She looked up. He was laughing, quietly, barely, the almost laugh of a man who had forgotten he knew how, the lines at the corners of his eyes, the slight loosening of the jaw that was always set so carefully against everything, the face of a man who has been holding something heavy all day and has just, without deciding to, set it down for a moment. "You should." She stopped. Too late. The words were already in the room. He looked at her. She looked back with the expression of a woman who has just said something she absolutely did not mean to say out loud and is now deciding whether to pretend she had not or simply accept the consequences. "You should smile more often," she said, because she was 23 and it was 7:30 and she had already come this far. He looked at her for a long moment. "Miss Murray," he said quietly. "Sir, sit down." She sat down, and outside the window Tuesday evening, London continued its business entirely unaware that in a second-floor executive suite, a man who had been holding something heavy all day had just set it down in front of the one person in the building he had absolutely no intention of setting it down in front of, and was not, for reasons he could not entirely account for, picking it back up. "Miss Murray." She looked up. He was looking at her with an expression she had not seen before. Not the professional assessment, not the Ice King, not the man who had been holding something heavy all day, something quieter than all of those. "Are you always like this?" he said. She blinked. Like what, sir? Like," he paused, the slight gesture of a man reaching for the right word and finding several that are almost right but not quite. "This. One moment you are on the floor of my office, and the next you are standing in my doorway with tea and a grandmother's philosophy, and you are—" He stopped. "You are entirely different from yesterday, and yet somehow exactly the same." She considered this. "I'm not sure I understand the question, sir." "No," he said. "Neither am I entirely." He looked at his tea. He turned the cup slightly on its saucer, the small unconscious movement of a man thinking. How do you do that? He said. Cry like that one moment and walk in here the next day as though as though everything is perfectly manageable. She opened her mouth. She closed it. I manage, sir, she said. One simply manages. One simply manages, he repeated. Yes. He looked at her for a long moment. I'm getting the feeling, he said slowly, that you know me a little, Miss Murray. Am I wrong? The question landed in the room and stayed there. She did not answer immediately. She was thinking about a connecting door that had never closed fully, about shoulders she could read without looking at them directly, about a man whose tea she had just made without being asked and carried through a door she had been telling herself all day not to walk through. I would not presume to say so, sir, she said carefully. And yet you brought me tea. Yes, which I find, by the way. He paused. Strange is the wrong word. I genuinely needed that tea. I think I have been sitting at this desk since before you arrived this morning, and I have not. He looked at the cup. I have not eaten. She said nothing. Do you know what it is? He said. To be overwhelmed, Miss Murray. She turned to answer. He was already answering it himself. Well, he leaned back slightly in his chair, the small movement of a man allowing himself, just for a moment, to stop holding his spine quite so correctly. I will tell you something. I'm sitting here, right now, smiling, which is, I cannot tell you the last time I sat at this desk and smiled. He looked at the window, the evening pressing dark against the glass. You simply walked in here with a cup of tea and said something about your grandmother, and I find I am... He shook his head slightly, smiling. She looked at her hands. You see, Miss Murray, his voice shifted. Not less warm, more careful. The warmth of a man who has decided to say something true and is choosing the words for it. My life is not as simple as perhaps it appears from where you sit. There are expectations of who I should be, how I should conduct myself, what I should want and when I should want it, and how I should feel about wanting it. A pause. I look at people sometimes, people with quieter lives, simpler lives, and I think they are considerably happier than anyone in this building gives them credit for. She was quiet for a moment. Then, with respect, sir, she said, I think simplicity and happiness are not as closely related as people with complicated lives tend to believe. He looked at her. People with simple lives, she said carefully, have simple problems, but they are still problems. The size of a problem is not what determines whether it breaks you. It is whether you have someone to help you carry it. The room was very quiet. He was looking at her with an expression she did not have a name for. The expression of a man who has just been handed something he did not know he needed and is holding it carefully, the way you hold something you are not sure yet whether to keep. Where, he said, did you come from, Miss Murray? She did not know how to answer that. She did not have to answer it immediately because he picked up his tea and looked at the window and said, in the voice of a man changing direction deliberately, I was to be married in June. She looked at him. To Elowen. He said the name with the particular care of a man who respects someone too much to be careless with their name even now. It was an arrangement between two families who have known each other a long time. We understood each other. We got along perfectly well. We were, a pause, suitable. Yes, sir, she said quietly. She called today from Paris. He turned the cup on its saucer again. She has met someone. She wanted to end the engagement properly, directly. She did not want to simply let it dissolve from a distance. Something moved across his face. Not heartbreak. Something more complicated than heartbreak. The expression of a man who has been told something that should devastate him and has found, sitting with it all day, that what he mostly feels is... He did not finish the thought out loud. I'm sorry, sir, she said. Are you for the disruption of it? Yes. He looked at her. Not the loss, he said. It was not quite a question. She did not answer it. He did not require her to. There was something missing, he said simply. We both knew it. She was brave enough to say it first. He set the cup down. June would have arrived, and we would have been suitable. And suitable is... He stopped. It is a very long time to be suitable. The lamp burned between them. May I ask, he said after a moment, with the slight shift in tone of a man who is changing the weight of the conversation deliberately, whether you have ever, that is, have you ever been close to being engaged, Miss Murray? She opened her mouth. Something happened to her expression, he noticed. Miss Murray. There was... She stopped, started again. My father had a friend. His friend had a son, I see. He was... She pressed her lips together. He was a perfectly decent man. I am certain he was a perfectly decent man. But he was not. She paused with the delicacy of a woman choosing her words carefully. He was not what one might call handsome. "Ah, that all?" she said. He said nothing. His expression was doing something very careful and controlled. "My father invited him to supper," she said, "several times. He was very kind. He brought flowers. He sat very close." A pause. He had a particular way of breathing. Through his mouth, she said, quite audibly. "I see." "And so," she said, with the expression of a woman who has made her peace with a decision she made several years ago and would make again without hesitation. I sneezed. He blinked. "I beg your pardon. The first time he came," she said, "I sneezed. Quite extensively. He left early. My father thought I had a chill." She looked at her hands. "The second time he came, I sneezed again. He left again. My father thought the chill had returned." She paused. "The third time, Miss Murray, I sneezed from the moment he arrived until the moment he left. He was very concerned. He said he did not want to be responsible for spreading bacteria to a delicate young woman." She looked up. He never came again. The silence that followed lasted exactly long enough. Then Reginald Thorne, eldest son of the Dunmere Lennox family, a man who had not laughed properly in longer than he could accurately remember, put his face in his hand and laughed. Not the almost laugh from earlier, not the quiet, controlled amusement of a man who has found something mildly diverting, properly, fully. The laugh of a man whose face is doing something it had forgotten how to do and is now doing it with considerable enthusiasm to make up for lost time. His shoulders shaking, his hand pressed over his eyes. The laugh coming up from somewhere deep and honest and entirely unmanaged. She watched him, and something happened in her chest that she was not going to examine tonight or possibly ever. "The poor man," he said, when he could say anything. "The poor, unsuspecting." "He was perfectly fine," she said with great dignity. "He moved to Shropshire. I heard he married a very nice woman from Telford." This made it worse. He laughed again, harder, the kind of laughter that has no interest in composure and is not going to develop any in the near future. "You," he said, when he had recovered something approaching the ability to form sentences, "are—" He stopped. He looked at her, the laughter settling slowly into something quieter, the expression that had been there earlier returning, the one she did not have a name for, warmer now, more certain of itself. "You are not at all," he said, "what I expected." She looked back at him. Outside the window, London pressed dark and quiet against the glass. The lamp burned between them. The connecting door stood open behind her the way it always did. "No, sir," she said softly. "No." And neither, she did not say, "Are you?"
Not a name, not yet a face, only what could be.
It was the clock that reminded them, not either of them noticing the time, not a conscious decision to stop. The clock on the mantel, striking 10 with the particular unhurried authority of something that has been marking the hours in this room long before either of them arrived and will continue long after. 1, 2, 3. She counted without meaning to. 4, 5, 6. He looked up. 7, 8, 9. They both looked at the clock. 10. The silence that followed was a different quality from all the silences that had come before it. Not the silence of two people who have nothing to say, the silence of two people who have just said a very great deal and have only now, at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday evening, noticed what time it is. "Miss Murray." "Yes, it is 10 o'clock. "Yes." A pause. "You told the driver not to wait." "Yes," she said. "I did." He looked at her with the expression of a man doing a rapid and not entirely comfortable calculation. "My coat," he said. He stood. He reached for his coat on the stand by the door. She stood also and gathered her things with the efficient movements of a woman who is being very professional about the fact that she has just spent 2.5 hours in her employer's office talking about her grandmother and a man from Shropshire and the nature of happiness and a cancelled June wedding, and has absolutely no feelings about any of it. She had a great many feelings about all of it. She put on her coat. He picked up his hat. They went to the door. He turned the handle. The door did not open. He turned it again with a slight additional pressure of a man who assumes the door has simply stuck. The door did not open. He looked at the door. He tried the handle once more with the focused, deliberate attention of a man who does not accept that doors are locked when he would like them to be open. The door remained entirely unmoved by his attention. "It appears," he said, very carefully, "to be locked." She looked at the door. She looked at him. "From the outside," she said. "Yes, it is locked from the outside." That would appear to be the case. She set her bag down. He set his hat down. They both looked at the door with the expression of two people who have just understood something and are taking a moment to fully appreciate the specific inconvenience of it. They tried the side door, also locked. They tried the small door at the back of the entrance hall that led to the post room, also locked. She looked at the row of dark windows above the entrance, the lamp burning in the corridor behind them, throwing a long rectangle of yellow light across the stone floor. "Would he not," she said slowly, "have seen the light?" "I beg your pardon." "The man who locks up." She looked at the windows. "The light is burning. Would he not have seen it and known someone was still inside?" Reginald looked at the windows. "The front curtains," he said, "are drawn at 8 o'clock. Mrs. Alston draws them before she leaves." A pause. "From the street you would see nothing." "Ah, and my car," he stopped. "My car is parked around the back today. The investigators this afternoon needed the front. From the street it would appear that no one is here." She absorbed this. "So," she said. "Yes, from the outside. Everything suggests the building is empty." He said it with the expression of a man who can see exactly how this happened and finds the logic of it deeply irritating precisely because it is faultless. "Yes." She looked at the locked door. "How silly of him," she said, "not to simply check." He looked at her. "Miss Murray," he said, "the man has locked up this building every night for 11 years without incident. I cannot entirely blame him for not anticipating." He stopped. "This?" "No," she agreed. "I suppose not." They stood in the entrance hall of Dunmere Lennox at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night with their coats on and nowhere to go, in the particular silence of a building that has locked itself around them, settling in on all sides. "We are not getting out tonight," he said. "No. Someone will come in the morning." "Yes." A pause. "Miss Murray." "Sir, I am sorry," he said, very directly. The apology of a man who means it and does not dress it up. "This is entirely—" "It is a locked door," she said. "It is nobody's fault." He looked at her for a moment. "Come," he said. "There is somewhere more comfortable than an entrance hall." Abernathy's office was at the end of the ground floor corridor. Reginald had a key. He had had a key since the investigation began. Access to every room, every file, every corner of a man's 30-year tenure that he was methodically and carefully going through in search of a truth that kept refusing to arrange itself into a simple answer. He unlocked the door. She went in ahead of him. It was a good room, not grand like the executive suite upstairs. No dark paneling, no brass lamp, no mahogany that had been chosen to impress, but good. The room of a man who had worked in it long enough to make it his without meaning to. A wide desk, bookshelves along one wall filled with ledgers and reference books, and one small framed photograph she did not look at directly. A round table with 2 chairs by the window. And against the far wall, a Chesterfield sofa, deep buttoned leather, wide and solid, the dark burgundy of it worn to a comfortable softness at the arms and back. The sofa of a man who had occasionally, over 30 years, needed to think horizontally. Reginald lit the lamp on the desk. The room came up warm around them. She sat in one of the chairs by the window. He stood for a moment looking at the Chesterfield with the expression of a man noticing something he had not noticed before. "I almost forgot these were down here," he said. "I should have had one taken up to my office." He ran a hand along the back of it. "Abernathy had them reupholstered 2 years ago, apparently. You can tell." He said the name the way he always said it now, carefully. The name of a man whose 30-year reputation he had taken apart and was trying, with the same thoroughness he applied to everything, to put back together. Something moved across his face. One moment, just one. Then he dismissed it. The way a man dismisses something he is not ready to look at directly but has not forgotten is there. "Go ahead and sit," he said. "It will be a long night." She sat in the chair. He settled onto the Chesterfield with the slightly self-conscious efficiency of a very tall man arranging himself on furniture that was not quite designed for him. Coat off, collar loosened, long legs extended. the lamp throwing a warm circle of light across the worn leather. He looked, she thought, exhausted. Not the managed exhaustion of a man who would never admit to being tired. The real kind. The kind that arrives when the thing you have been holding all day finally finds a place to put itself down. "Mr. Thorne," she said. "Mr. You should sleep. I'm perfectly—" "You have not eaten since yesterday," she said. "You have been at your desk since before I arrived this morning. You have been laughing and talking and—" She stopped. "You should sleep." He looked at her from the Chesterfield with the expression of a man who is too tired to argue and knows it. "Miss Murray," he said. "Sir, are you going to tell me what to do all night?" "Only until you fall asleep," she said. "After that, you will not be able to hear me." Something moved at the corner of his mouth. "My grandmother," she said before he could respond, "used to tell me stories when I could not sleep. Would you like to hear my favorite?" He shifted slightly on the Chesterfield, settling, the long body of a man finding the particular arrangement of cushions that would do for the night. "Miss Murray," he said, "you should get some sleep yourself. I am not tired. You have been at your desk since—" "I'm not tired," she said again, firmly, in the voice of a woman who is perhaps a little tired but is not going to admit it and certainly not going to sleep in Abernathy's office in front of her employer without something to occupy the space between them. Might as well make use of the time. "You look restless." He looked at the ceiling. "Go ahead then," he said, "with your story." She settled back in her chair. "My grandmother had this character," she said. "His name was always Dullhead. Always. Every story, different tale, same Dullhead." She folded her hands in her lap. In this one, Dullhead lived with his mother, and he had a sister. She was so beautiful that men came from all over to try to win her hand. They would arrive at the family home with gifts, with declarations, with their best coats and their finest manners. Said Reginald, his eyes still on the ceiling. "But two men stood apart from the rest," she said. "The first was the wealthiest man anyone had seen. He could give more than all the others combined. Gold, land, fine things. Whatever the family could want, he could provide it twice over. And the second had very little to give." She said it simply. But her heart belonged to him, had always belonged to him. Before the wealthy man arrived, before any of them arrived, it had always been him. Reginald said nothing. His eyes were still on the ceiling, but the quality of his silence had changed. "The family," she continued, "was not interested in hearts. They saw the gold and the land and the fine things, and they made their decision. The wealthy man was welcomed. The second man was turned away." "And Dullhead," said Reginald, his voice slower now, the voice of a man who was listening from somewhere closer to sleep than waking. "Dullhead was watching," she said, "the way he always watched, and he saw something that the family did not see. Something about the wealthy man that never sat quite right. Something underneath the gold and the fine things that made Dullhead's stomach turn every time the man smiled. What did he see? He went to his mother," she said. "He went to his mother and he said, 'This man is not what he appears. There is something wrong. We must not let my sister marry him. We must—' Miss Murray." "Sir, where is this going?" She opened her mouth. And then a sound from outside, from the street. The particular sound of a motor-car engine coming slowly along the road and stopping. She was out of her chair before she had finished deciding to move. "That is a car," she said. She ran to the window. She could see the thin slice of street through the gap in the curtain, the sweep of headlamps, the dark shape of a motor car sitting at the curb, the engine idling. "That is Samuel," she said. "That is my driver." She was already at the door of Abernathy's office, already in the corridor, already at the front door with both hands flat against it. "Samuel," she called, her voice carrying through the thick wood with considerably more volume than she had ever used inside this building. "Samuel, we are locked inside." "We are." Reginald was beside her. He knocked. Not the frantic knocking of a man who has lost his composure. The deliberate, measured knock of a man who intends to be heard and will continue until he is. "Hello?" he called. "We are locked in." "The front door. We need the key." A pause. Then, muffled, from outside, the unmistakable sound of Samuel's voice, saying something that was not entirely audible through the door, but had the quality of a man who has just understood something and is already moving. They saw the light of his lantern through the thin glass panel above the door, heard his footsteps retreating rapidly down the front steps, heard the motorcar door, Heard the engine. "Where is he going?" she said. "For the man with the keys," said Reginald. "There will be someone nearby. There always is." They waited. She looked at the door. He stood beside her. The entrance hall was very quiet. "Where was this going?" he said. She looked up at him. "The story," he said. "Dullhead, the wealthy man. What had he seen?" "I have not decided yet," she said. He looked at her for a moment in the lamplight of the entrance hall with the expression of a man who does not entirely believe that, but is too tired and too warm from an evening of unexpected conversation to press the point. "You?" he said quietly. "Are hopelessly romantic, Miss Murray." "Yes," she said. "I know." They heard the motor car returning. Voices outside. 2 sets of footsteps on the front steps. The sound of keys. Several keys, tried in sequence. And then the particular sound of a lock giving way and the door swinging open and the cold night airs of London arriving all at once into the entrance hall. Samuel stood in the doorway. He was in his coat over his nightclothes and his hat was not entirely straight, and he had the expression of a man who fell asleep in his chair, woke with a start at 10:30, and has been moving at considerable speed ever since. "Miss Murray," he said. "I'm so sorry. I went home. I meant to come back. And the chair," he stopped. "I'm so sorry." "It is quite all right, Samuel," she said. "It is not all right at all," he said firmly. "It is not all right in the slightest." Behind him, the man with the keys, a small, neat man in a coat hastily thrown over what appeared to be his evening clothes, was looking at Reginald with the expression of someone who has just understood whose building this is and is recalibrating his entire demeanor accordingly. "Mr. Thorne," he said. "I do sincerely apologize, sir. I did my rounds at the usual time. I looked for the car at the front as I always do, and it was not there, and I assumed the car was around the back," said Reginald. "You could not have known." "Even so, sir." "It is done," said Reginald. "No harm. Thank you for coming." He said it in the voice that ended conversations. The conversation ended. The night air was cold and clean after hours of lamplit rooms. She stood on the front steps, pulling on her gloves and breathing it in. Samuel was already at the motor car. The man with the keys had gone. The street was quiet. "Miss Murray." She turned. Reginald was standing at the top of the steps with his hat in his hand, and the particular expression of a man who is about to say something practical and is aware that it is going to come out as something else. "I can," he started. "That is, my car is around the back. I could." "Samuel is here," she said. "Yes. He came back for me." "Yes. He's right there." "Yes," said Reginald. "He is." Neither of them moved. Samuel, from the motor car, was looking at the middle distance with the elaborate discretion of a man who sees everything and is paid to see nothing. The man with the keys, who had not quite left yet, was looking at them both with the undisguised interest of a man who has been dragged out of his evening at 10:30 and feels he has earned the right to observe whatever this is. She looked at Reginald. He looked at her. They both felt it at the same moment. The 2 pairs of eyes, the quiet street, the particular quality of a situation that had tipped, somewhere between the locked door and Dullhead and the Chesterfield, and you are hopelessly romantic, Miss Murray, into something that 2 men standing on a London street at 10:30 were now watching with considerable attention. "Samuel will take me home," she said, very properly, very clearly, for the benefit of everyone present, including herself. "Yes," said Reginald. "Of course. Good night, Mr. Thorne." "Good night, Miss Murray." She went down the steps. She got into the motor car. Samuel pulled away from the curb without a word, because Samuel was a worrier, not a talker, and the distinction had always served her exceptionally well. She sat in the back and looked at her hands in the dark. The lamp-lit office. The clock striking 10. The biscuits from the cabinet, his shoulders shaking with laughter. The Chesterfield, his voice going slower and slower. "You are hopelessly romantic, Miss Murray." "Where is this going?" she heard him say, in the particular silence of a motor car moving through London at 10:30 on a Tuesday night. She looked out at the dark streets going past. She did not know where it was going. She was fairly certain that was the most frightening thing she had ever not known. She pressed her hand over her mouth and smiled into the dark all the way home. And on the steps of Dunmere Lennox, Reginald Thorne watched the motor car until its lights disappeared around the corner. He stood there a moment longer than necessary. Then he put on his hat. He went around the back to his car. He sat in it for a moment without starting the engine. Hopelessly romantic, he had said. He looked at his hands on the wheel. He started the engine. But he did not, for quite some time, drive anywhere.
Not a name, not yet a face, only
It was Thursday, the day after the locked door, the day after Dullhead and the Chesterfield and Samuel coming back, and the two men watching them on the front steps with the elaborate discretion of people who are not being discreet at all. The day after sitting in the back of a motor car, smiling into the dark all the way home. Thursday. She had come in to find her tea steaming. She had said good morning. He had said good morning. The connecting door had stayed open the way it always did, and the morning had moved the way mornings moved now. The Hartley papers, the Pemberton correspondence, his voice through the door, her figures on the page, the particular rhythm of two people who have found, without meaning to, the shape of each other's working day. And underneath all of it, the tug. The small, persistent tug that had been there since the beginning and had been getting less small and less ignorable with every passing day. She had made her decision on the way home. In the back of the motor car, with London going past in the dark and Samuel's shoulders steady in the front seat, she had sat with everything that had happened in that lamp-lit office, and she had said to herself, quietly, clearly, with the particular resolve of a woman who has been carrying something too long, I cannot do this anymore. Not the position, not the work, not the connecting door or the steaming tea or the good morning that had started to mean considerably more than good morning. The lie. She could not carry the lie anymore. Not now. Not after Tuesday. Not after you are not at all what I expected and hopelessly romantic, and a man sitting in a motor car in the dark, not starting the engine. She was going to tell him. She had decided. She went to Sebastian's office first because she needed to say it out loud to someone before she could say it to Reginald. Because Sebastian knew. Sebastian was the only person in this building who knew all of it, and she needed to look at someone who knew all of it and say, I'm going to tell your brother, and hear herself say it and make it real. She knocked on Sebastian's door. Come. Sebastian Thorne looked up from his desk with the particular expression he always had. Easy, warm, the immediate brightness of a man who was genuinely pleased to see whoever walked through his door and had the gift of making everyone feel it was specifically them he had been hoping for. Miss Murray. He leaned back in his chair. What a pleasant surprise. Sit down. I will stand, thank you. Something shifted slightly in his expression. He read her the way his brother read her. Completely, immediately. But where Reginald's reading was precise and careful, Sebastian's was instinctive. He felt the room before he thought about it. He felt the room now. All right, he said. Stand then. She stood. I'm going to tell him, she said. I wanted you to know first. I thought you deserved to know first. But I am going to tell Mr. Thorne what happened. All of it. The signature. Your plan. Everything. Sebastian looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. Not unkindly. That was the thing about Sebastian. He was never unkind. He was warm and easy, and he smiled, and he took things apart, and he was never once unkind while he did it. Sit down, Miss Murray, he said again. I said I will stand. You will want to sit down for this, he said. I promise you. She sat down. He leaned forward, elbows on the desk, the posture of a man settling in for a conversation he has already won and is generous enough not to rush. I see, he said, that you have fallen for my brother. She said nothing. You do not need to confirm it. He tilted his head slightly. It is in your eyes. It has been in your eyes for, longer than you would like me to say. He paused, and a small gesture. Well, my brother is not a demonstrative man, but I know my brother. She looked at her hands. Which makes this, he exhaled slowly, which makes what you are proposing considerably more complicated than you seem to think it is. I've made my decision, she said. Yes, he said. You have. And I'm going to ask you to think about it very carefully before it becomes irreversible. He looked at her directly. Because you deceived him, Miss Murray. You sat across from my brother every single day and you looked him in the eye and you let him believe something that was not true. And you caused him, he paused, you caused him to dismiss poor Abernathy. 30 years, Miss Murray. Can you hear yourself? Can you sit there and listen to what you're saying? I know what I did. Do you? He said it gently. Do you really? Because I am not certain you understand what you are proposing to walk into that office and say you are going to sit across from a man who has, against every professional instinct he possesses, begun to care for you, genuinely, and you're going to tell him that you lied to his face, deliberately, knowingly, from the very beginning. Yes, she said, that is exactly what I'm going to tell him. For your father's medicine, said Sebastian. She went very still. I wonder, he said it softly, almost to himself. I wonder if my brother will simply say, oh well, never mind. Let us ride off into the sunshine. He looked at her. Do you know what trust is to Reginald, Miss Murray? She thought of Sebastian's own voice saying it. Trust is my brother's everything. It is everything, said Sebastian. It is the only currency he has ever truly valued. You could take his money, his position, his name, and he would rebuild. But his trust, he shook his head. You saw how quickly he sent Abernathy home. A man he had never met, a man with 30 years of service, gone in a day, because the evidence, your evidence, suggested betrayal. That was different, was it? That was... You confirmed the signature, said Sebastian. You are the reason Abernathy went home, and now you want to go into my brother's office and tell him that, and tell him you knew, and tell him it was deliberate. A pause. And then what? You sit there and wait for him to forgive you. I do not expect forgiveness, she said. I expect... What? He looked at her. What do you expect, Miss Murray? She had no answer. My brother detests lies, said Sebastian, more than anything in this world. More than failure, more than weakness, more than any of the things that are supposed to matter to a man like him. He leaned back. You will be gone in a split second. You understand that. Whatever he feels, and I'm not saying he feels nothing. I'm not saying that. It will not matter. The moment you tell him what you did and how you did it and why, you will be gone before you finish the sentence. Then my heart will be free, she said. Sebastian looked at her. Free, he murmured, the word sitting in his mouth like something he was tasting. Yes, free. He looked at his desk. He looked back at her. You have no idea, he said quietly, what and who you are playing with, Miss Murray. A pause. Keep your mouth shut. The room was very quiet. She looked at him. He looked back at her with the warm, easy expression of a man who has just done something surgical and has the grace to look sorry about it. I say this, he started. Do not, she said. Please do not tell me you say it for my own good. He said nothing. She stood. She smoothed her skirt. She went to the door. Miss Murray. She stopped. She did not turn around. Whatever you decide. His voice different now. Something underneath the warmth that might, in another man, have been called guilt. Whatever you decide. I'm sorry. For my part in it. I want you to know that. She stood at the door for a moment. I know, she said. She went out. She walked back down the corridor with her spine straight and her hands steady and her face giving her away completely. She did not know that around the corner, with his back against the wall and his hat still in his hand, Reginald Thorne had heard every word. He had come to give Sebastian information about the case. He had heard his brother's voice and stopped, not because he was a man who eavesdropped, because he had heard the particular tone, warm, careful, precise, that Sebastian used when he wanted something. The tone Reginald had been hearing since they were boys. The tone that meant his brother was taking something apart and smiling while he did it. He had stopped. He had listened. He had heard his brother say poor Abernathy in the voice of a man performing sorrow for an audience. He had heard everything. He stood with his back against the wall for a long moment after her footsteps had gone. Then he looked at his hat. He put it on. He went back, blood boiling. He came back blood boiling, not loudly. That was the thing about Reginald Thorne. He did not boil loudly. He boiled the way certain things boiled, deep and contained and considerably more dangerous for the containment. The kind of boiling that had no steam because it had no release, because a man like Reginald did not release things in corridors or on staircases or in any place where someone might see. He went to his office. He sat down. He looked at the connecting door. She was not back yet. He put his hands flat on the desk. He looked at them. He thought about over 30 years. He thought about a man he had never properly met, whose entire professional life he had dismantled in a single afternoon based on evidence that had been manufactured in this building by people who worked in this building and smiled at him across desks in this building every single day. He thought about poor Abernathy in his brother's mouth. He thought about what she was going to say when he asked her. He watched the connecting door. He waited. She came back with her face giving her away. He saw it the moment she sat down, the careful spine, the hands on the keys, the expression of a woman who had just been taken apart by someone who smiled while they did it and had not yet had time to put herself back together. He looked at her for one moment through the connecting door. "Miss Murray." She looked up. "My office, please." She came through the connecting door with the expression of a woman who was too weary to read the room properly, too unsettled from Sebastian's office, too worn down by the weight of everything she had been carrying to notice that the quality of the silence in his office was different from any silence she had sat inside before. He was standing at his desk with his coat on. "Follow me," he said. He did not wait. She followed, down the corridor, past the entrance hall, past Abernathy's office with its worn Chesterfield and its lamp and its one small framed photograph, to the boardroom. He opened the door. He went in. She followed. He closed the door behind them with the quiet, deliberate click of a man who had chosen this room specifically because it had no glass panels and no corridor views and no way for anyone passing outside to see what was about to happen inside it. He put his hat on the table. He looked at her. The portraits looked down from the walls. The long table ran between them. The room had the particular quality of a space that had witnessed a great many difficult things and had developed over the years the patience of something that knew how to wait. "Miss Murray," he said. "Sir." He looked at her for a long moment. Not the professional assessment. Not the Ice King. The look of a man who is seeing something he thought he knew and finding the shape of it changed in a way he cannot yet account for. "Who are you?" he said. "Really?" The question landed in the room and stayed there. Not aggressive. Not cold, something more unsettling than both. The genuine confusion of a man who has been building a picture of someone for weeks and has just found that the picture does not match what is underneath it and needs to understand how that happened. "Sir, you and my brother." He stopped, the jaw tightening once. Is there something between you and Sebastian?" She woke up. "No." Immediately. Clearly. "No, sir. Absolutely not." "I heard you," he said. "The two of you. In his office." The floor tilted. She stammered, her mind scrambling, the weariness of Sebastian's office still in her bones, and now him, standing across the boardroom table with that expression and the hat on the table between them and the door closed behind her. "Sir, it is not what—" "Stop." She stopped. "Stop lying to me, Miss Murray." His voice doing something she had never heard it do. Not the Ice King, something rawer than that. Something that was costing him considerably more than cold ever had. Something that had been sitting behind the connecting door and the steaming tea and the motor car in the dark and all the small accumulated weight of weeks and was coming out now, not as anger exactly, but as something that was in the same family as anger and considerably more personal. "You are making me—" He stopped himself. He looked at the table, then back at her. "What did my brother say to you?" he said. "In that office. What did he say to you?" She looked at him, and she thought about keep your mouth shut. She thought about you will be gone in a split second. She thought about the flush Sebastian had seen in her eyes and named without asking permission, and she thought about steaming tea and a connecting door and a man on the floor of his own executive suite saying, "You are so small," without knowing he was saying it. She thought about Dullhead and a Chesterfield and a motor car sitting at the curb not moving. She thought about an unfinished sentence that was about to become even more unfinished, and she made her choice. "It was Sebastian," she said. The room went completely still. "He came to me before you arrived." Her voice was steady. She did not know how it was steady. "He knew you were coming. He said—" She stopped, started again. He did not say it all plainly. Not in so many words, but in enough words. "He told me. He told me that once Alawan returned, you were planning to send me home. That my position was never secure, that you had only kept me on temporarily, and that when your fiancé arrived, there would be no place for me." Reginald said nothing. "He said he would help me," she said, "with my father's medicine, with everything, if I helped him. He said," she pressed on, "he said that if I could help to cause trouble for Abernathy, if I confirmed that the signatures matched when they did not, your father would find you unfit to run the firm. That he would remove you and place Sebastian in your position instead." The silence in the room changed. Not louder, deeper. "I believed him," she said. I needed this position, my father's medicine, the rent. I had nowhere else to go, and he told me I was already going to lose everything, and he was offering me a way to... I know. Her voice faltered for the first time. I know there is no excuse for it. I confirmed the signature. I knew it was wrong. I knew it from the moment I did it, and I have known it every day since. She looked at him directly. I'm sorry, she said, for Abernathy, for all of it. I'm sorry. Reginald stood very still. Not the controlled stillness of a man managing a professional difficulty. The stillness of a man who has just had the last piece of a picture placed in front of him and is standing with the full, terrible, completed shape of it arriving all at once. His brother who had come to him after the dismissal with his warm, easy smile and his hand on his shoulder and said, "You did the right thing, Reggie. Father will be pleased." His brother who had said poor Abernathy in a corridor with a warmth that had nothing underneath it. His brother who had stood behind that wall today and taken this woman apart piece by piece with the particular skill of a man who had been practicing that skill his entire life. His brother. She watched him swallow. It was the driest thing she had ever seen, the swallow of a man with nothing left. No words, no distance, nothing to put between himself and what he had just heard. His eyes went somewhere past her, somewhere that was not this room. "And to think," he said, very quietly, the words arriving from somewhere so far inside him that by the time they came out, they had no performance left in them at all. "I was beginning to..." He stopped. The unfinished sentence sat between them. She knew what came after beginning to. He knew she knew. Neither of them said it. He looked at the table. He looked at his hat. He did not pick it up. He looked at a point on the wall past her left shoulder that was not a portrait and not a window, not anything except the place a man looks when he has nowhere left to look and needs somewhere to put his eyes while everything rearranges itself. "I do not wish to hear your voice," he said. "At this time, Miss Murray." She said nothing. "Please turn your face away from me." She turned. She looked at the door. "You should go home." His voice doing something at the very edges that she was not going to examine. "Not now. Not here. I do not think you should be here for the next 4 weeks. I will be in touch when..." He stopped. "I will deal with my brother." The particular pause of a man who has said all the practical things and has run out of practical things and is standing on the other side of them with nothing left but what he is not going to say. "Please," the word arriving differently from all the others. The please of a man asking for something he cannot name. "I'm not feeling well. I cannot." He did not finish that one either. She heard him move. She did not turn around. She heard him pick up his hat. She heard the boardroom door open. She heard his footsteps in the corridor. That particular quality of stillness in motion, the way he moved through a space, going away from her with the same certainty he brought to everything except this one thing he was walking away from at 2 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. And then nothing. She stood in the boardroom alone. The portraits looked down. The long table ran its length. She looked at the door. She breathed. Once, twice. She went back to her office. She did not rush. She did not run. She moved with the careful, deliberate precision of a woman who is holding herself together with both hands and knows that if she stops moving, she is not going to be able to start again. She got her things. She put on her coat. She put on her gloves, one finger at a time, with the focused attention of someone who needs something to do that is not feeling what she is feeling. She picked up her bag. She went downstairs. She stopped on the bottom step. The car was there. Samuel at the wheel, patient, steady. The particular stillness of a man who had been told nothing and understood everything. She stood on the bottom step and looked at the car. He had arranged it before he left. While everything was falling apart in that boardroom, he had thought of her getting home. He had made sure she had a way to get home. And that small, careful thing he had done while his chest was doing what it was doing, hurt her more than anything that had happened in that room. More than the stillness, more than the unfinished sentence, more than, "Please turn your face away from me." The car was there. She went down the last step. She got in. Samuel pulled away from the curb with the quiet efficiency of a man who knew his job and knew when his job was simply to drive. They moved through London in silence. Friday afternoon London, people on the pavements, buses, the ordinary relentless business of a city that did not know and did not care what had just happened in a boardroom 2 streets back. She looked at her hands in her lap, her ink-stained fingers. "And to think I was beginning to..." She pressed her lips together. Samuel glanced in the mirror. "Are you having a headache, Miss Murray?" he said. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I am." It was 2 o'clock. Her aunt was in the parlor when she arrived. She heard her voice before she opened the door. Loud, warm, the particular voice of a woman who fills whatever room she is in without noticing she is doing it. Her father's murmured response. The smell of something cooking. The ordinary sounds of an afternoon that had no idea what kind of afternoon it was. "Evadne," her aunt started from the parlor doorway. "I am fine," she said. "I just need to lie down." She went to her room. She sat on the edge of her bed. She took off her gloves one finger at a time the way she had put them on. She put them in her lap. She looked at them, and then she stopped holding it together. She cried for almost 2 hours. Not the sudden helpless crying of the interrogation, the kind that arrives without permission and cannot be reasoned with. This was different. This was the quiet, sustained crying of a woman who knows exactly why she is crying, and knows exactly whose fault it is, and knows that knowing whose fault it is does not make it hurt any less. She had done this. She had walked into Dunmare Lennox a number of weeks ago and made a choice and told herself it was survival, and every day since she had told herself it was survival, and it had been survival, and it had also been a lie, and now the lie had done what lies do. She had fallen in love with a man she had deceived, and now she was going to spend 4 weeks in 2 small rooms with her father's medicine and her ink-stained fingers and the particular silence of a connecting door that was no longer open. Outside her room, her aunt moved through the house with her loud opinions and her strong tea. Her father's voice, low, comfortable, not knowing. She pressed her face into her pillow, and to think I was beginning to... She closed her eyes. She did not sleep, but after a while, a long while, she stopped.
Not a name, not yet a face, only what could be. If the night
He was there before the lights were on. The night watchman saw him coming up the front steps at 5:30 and said nothing, because a man who arrives at 5:30 on a Friday morning with that particular quality of stillness about him is not a man you say good morning to and expect anything back. He went upstairs. He did not turn on the light in his office immediately. He sat in the dark. The connecting door was open the way it always was. On the other side of it, her desk, her pen in its place, her ledger closed. The small, particular order of a woman who left things as she found them because she had been raised to leave things as she found them, and because order was the thing she could control when everything else was not. He sat with that for a while. The absence of her, not the professional absence of a clerk who had been told to stay home. The other kind, the kind that had weight and shape and sat in the room like something that had been there so long it had started to belong. He had not slept. He had gone home and sat in his study and looked at his hands and thought about 30 years, and a brother and a woman who had walked into his building a number of weeks ago with ink on her right finger, and desperation she had been too proud to show, and a lie she had been too desperate not to tell. He had thought about Sebastian's voice saying "poor Abernathy" with nothing underneath it. He had thought about her voice in the boardroom, steady, he had noticed that, steadier than it had any right to be. The voice of a woman who had decided to tell the truth and was telling it even though it was costing her everything. He had thought about "I was beginning to..." He had not finished that sentence in his study either. He sat in the dark office until the building began to fill around him. Footsteps on the stairs, voices in the entrance hall, the particular sounds of a working day assembling itself floor by floor the way it did every morning regardless of what had happened the evening before. He turned on the light. He looked at her desk through the connecting door. He looked away. He picked up his pen. He put it down. He stood up. Sebastian's office was down the corridor. Same wing, same floor. The executive corridor that Reginald had walked every morning since he arrived. Past her desk, past the boardroom, past the door that had his brother's name on it in the same lettering as his own. He had walked past that door every day. He walked toward it now, with the unhurried, deliberate movement of a man who has made a decision and is not rushing toward it because he does not need to rush. It will still be there when he arrives. It has been there since yesterday afternoon in a corridor with his back against the wall, and it will be there when he opens his brother's door, and it will still be there after. He knocked once. "Come," Sebastian looked up from his desk with the immediate warm brightness of a man who was genuinely pleased to see whoever walked through his door. The brightness adjusted slightly when he saw Reginald's face, only slightly. Sebastian was very good at adjustments. "Reggie," he said, "you're here early." "I'm always here early," said Reginald. "Yes." Sebastian leaned back. "You are. Is everything—" He looked past Reginald's shoulder at the empty corridor. "Where is Miss Murray?" "I did not see her at her desk." "She's not well," said Reginald. "Ah." Sebastian's expression moved into something that looked like concern and had the right shape for concern and was not concern. "Nothing serious, I hope." "She is not well," said Reginald again. "Come with me." Sebastian looked at him for a moment. Then he stood. "Of course," he said. "Shall we, perhaps somewhere private? Out of the eyes of others?" "Yes," said Reginald. "Somewhere private. The boardroom. Same door, same portraits, same long table." Reginald closed the door. He did not put his hat on the table this time. He stood in the middle of the room and looked at his brother and said nothing for a moment. Just looked, the way you look at something when you are trying to find the version of it you thought you knew and cannot locate it anymore. Sebastian stood with his hands in his pockets and his easy posture and his expression doing something careful and controlled underneath the warmth. "What is this about?" Sebastian said. "I think you know what this is about." "Reggie." "Do not," said Reginald. "Call me Reggie in this room." Sebastian looked at him. The warmth adjusted again. "All right," he said. "What would you like to talk about?" "Abernathy," said Reginald. The name sat in the room between them. Sebastian said nothing. "I was in the corridor yesterday," said Reginald. "Outside your office?" "I heard everything." The warmth left Sebastian's face completely. For one unguarded moment, just one, the face underneath it was visible. Not villainous, not cold, simply caught. The face of a man who has been extraordinarily careful his entire life and has just discovered that careful was not careful enough. Then the adjustment. Faster this time. More deliberate. "So," said Sebastian quietly. "You know." "I know," said Reginald. "All of it. The plan. Abernathy. What you told her about father finding me unfit. What you promised her about her position and her father's medicine." He looked at his brother with the steady, unblinking attention of a man who has put something together, piece by piece, and is showing his brother the completed picture. "I know that you found a frightened girl with a sick father, and not enough money to say no to you, and you used her. Deliberately, carefully, the way you use everything." Sebastian said nothing. 30 years, said Reginald. "His name will not recover from this in a year. A man who gave everything to this firm, and you—" He stopped, the jaw moving once. She was frightened. She had nothing, and you used that. "I was protecting—" "You were protecting yourself," said Reginald, "the way you have always protected yourself. Since we were boys, the way that has always somehow managed to cost everyone around you something they were not asked if they were willing to give." Sebastian looked at the table. "It was not this thing you have," said Reginald. "This need, this hunger for something that was never yours to begin with. We were boys, Sebastian, and you had it then, and you have it now, and it is destroying everything around you, and you cannot see it." He looked at his brother, and then he hit him. Once. Not a brawl, not a loss of control in the messy, sprawling sense. One precise moment where everything he had been containing since 5:30 this morning, since yesterday afternoon in the corridor, since the dry swallow in the boardroom and the unfinished sentence and the car he had arranged before he left, found the one exit available to it, and took it. His knuckles. Sebastian's jaw. Sebastian's head turned with the impact. He did not hit back. He stood with one hand raised to his jaw and looked at his brother with an expression that was not quite guilt and not quite apology, and was somehow considerably worse than both. The room was very quiet. Reginald turned his back. He stood at the window. Outside Friday morning, London was going about its business with the cheerful indifference of a city that had no idea what was happening in the executive wing of a building on this particular street. "Tell me something," he said. His voice was quiet. Not the Ice King, quiet. Something older than that. Something that had been sitting underneath the Ice King for a very long time and was coming out now because there was no one left to perform composure for. "Do you hate me that much?" Sebastian said nothing. "I never asked for any of this," said Reginald. "I did not ask father to send me back. I did not ask to be put in charge. I did not ask for the responsibility or the position or any of the things you seem to think I took from you deliberately. A pause. "I came back because Father asked me to. Because that is what I do. Because someone in this family has to be the one who—" He stopped. He pressed his hand flat against the window frame. "Sir, I came back because Father asked me to," he said. "Because that is what I do. Because someone in this family has always had to be the one who does what is asked of them without complaint and without question, and you have never once—" He stopped again. He looked out at the street below. Sebastian lowered his hand slowly from his jaw. "So," he said quietly, "you fired her?" "No," said Reginald. Still at the window, still not turning, "I sent her home for 4 weeks. The silence that followed was a different quality from all the silences that had come before it. Sebastian looked at his brother's back. 4 weeks, he said. "Yes, not fired." Sebastian said it slowly, turning it over. 4 weeks. "I could not bear to look at her," said Reginald. "Not right now, not like that." Sebastian said nothing for a moment. He looked at his brother standing at the window with his hand pressed against the frame and his back very straight, and his jaw set against everything he was not going to say in this room. Something moved across Sebastian's face. Not the warmth, not the adjustment. Something underneath both of those. Raw, unmanaged. The face of a man who knows exactly what he is and has lived with that knowledge for long enough to have made a kind of peace with it, and is finding in this particular room on this particular Friday morning that the peace is less solid than he thought. "So you do not blame her," he said. "Fully." Reginald said nothing. Sebastian looked at him for a long moment, and then, slowly, with the particular deliberateness of a man making a point he has no intention of softening, he began to clap. Once, twice, 3 times. "Well," he said. "Well, well, well." "Sebastian, big brother," said Sebastian, "has fallen." The clap stopping. His voice doing something that was not quite mockery and not quite wonder, and was somehow both simultaneously. "Finally, in our entire miserable, complicated, sick little life, you have fallen for someone. That is not—" "She is not a baby, Reginald," said Sebastian. "She is not a child. She made a choice. She was frightened and she was desperate, and she made a choice, and yes, I gave her the opportunity, but she took it." He looked at his brother's back directly. "You know that. You're standing there at that window with your back straight and your jaw set, and your 4 weeks of punishment all arranged, and you know that she chose." "Yes," said Reginald. "She did. And yet here you are," said Sebastian, "not sending her away for good. 4 weeks. Reginald Thorne, who does not forgive. 4 weeks. A pause. Something in his expression that might, in another light, have been called affection. "You have it badly, brother. You have it very badly indeed." "Get out," said Reginald. "I'm going." Sebastian picked up his hat from the table where he had set it. He moved toward the door. He stopped with his hand on the handle. "For what it is worth," he did not turn around. "She fought for you, in that office yesterday, before she knew you were there. She came to tell you the truth because she could not carry it any more." A pause. "That is not nothing, Reginald." He opened the door. "That is not nothing at all." He left. Reginald stood in the boardroom alone. The portraits looked down. The long table ran its length. He stood at the window with his hand on the frame and looked at Friday morning London going past below and said nothing, and thought everything and finished none of it. "Beginning to," said his mind quietly. He pressed his hand harder against the window frame. He stood there for a long time. Then he went back to his office. He sat at his desk. He looked at the connecting door. Her desk on the other side. Her pen in its place. Her ledger closed. The particular silence of 4 weeks stretching out ahead of him like something he had chosen and was going to live with, and was already, at 9 o'clock on a Friday morning, finding considerably longer than it had seemed when he arranged it. He picked up his pen. He put it down. He looked at the connecting door. He picked up his pen again. He began to work. The connecting door stayed open. He had not closed it. He was not going to close it. That was the one thing, the one small thing he was not going to do. A number of things happened in the 2 weeks Evadne was not there. He reinstated Abernathy on Monday morning, not quietly, not with a memo circulated through the head clerk and a note left on a desk. Publicly. He called every member of staff to the great hall, from the most senior man in the executive wing to the most junior clerk on the ground floor. And he stood at the top of the grand staircase, and he spoke. He had been wrong. The investigation had been compromised from the beginning by information that was incorrect. Abernathy had done nothing. 30 years of faithful service stood exactly as it had always stood. Without question, without fault, without a single mark against it. The dismissal was being reversed with immediate effect. Abernathy would be returning to his position with the firm's full apology and the firm's full respect. And then he looked out at the assembled staff and said, "The whispers stop today." Not a request. The whispers stopped. Abernathy came back on Wednesday. Reginald met him at the door himself. The apology was private. Just the two of them in the boardroom with the door closed. And whatever was said in that room stayed in that room. Abernathy emerged with the particular dignity of a man who has been through something difficult and has come out the other side of it with his character intact and his position restored, and has decided, with the quiet grace of someone who has been in the world long enough to know that grace costs less than bitterness, to leave it there. His father knew nothing. Brothers did not wash their linen in public. Whatever had happened in the boardroom on Friday morning between Reginald and Sebastian, the hit, the window, the clap, the 4 weeks, stayed in the boardroom. Sebastian returned to his office. Reginald returned to his. They spoke when business required it. They did not speak otherwise. The particular cold civility of two men who have said everything that needed to be said and have agreed, without agreeing, to say nothing further. Sebastian watched his brother across the corridor and said nothing. He watched and he noted and he filed it away in the particular way of a man who has always paid attention to his brother, even when, especially when, his brother did not want to be paid attention to. He ordered her tea every morning. He did not decide to do this. He simply did it, the way he had done it since the first week she moved upstairs. The calculation, the timing, the particular strength she had mentioned once in passing, all of it continuing with the same quiet precision as though she were about to walk through the connecting door at any moment and sit at her desk and put her hands on the keys and begin. Her desk was empty, her pen was in its place, her ledger was closed. The tea arrived every morning at the exact right temperature and sat on the exact right corner of the desk and cooled, untouched in the particular silence of a room that was missing something it had not known it needed until it was gone. Mrs. Beales noticed on Tuesday. Mrs. Beales told someone on Wednesday. By Thursday it had reached the ground floor. The Ice King, they said, in the careful lowered voices of people who were very aware that the Ice King had excellent hearing, and had told them the whispers stopped today, and were whispering anyway because some things were simply too extraordinary not to whisper about, is ordering tea for an empty desk. Every morning. Like she is coming back any minute. Like she is a ghost, said someone. She is on leave, said someone else. That is all. She is on leave. Nobody orders tea for someone on leave, said the first voice. Nobody had an answer for that. Sebastian heard it. He was passing the corridor on Thursday afternoon and heard the tail end of it and kept walking with his hands in his pockets and his easy expression and did not say anything to anyone. He went back to his office. He sat at his desk. He thought about a man ordering tea for an empty desk every morning with the focused, deliberate precision of someone who needed it to mean something other than what it meant. He thought about 4 weeks. He thought about, I could not bear to look at her. Not right now. Not like that. He picked up his pen. He put it down. He looked at the ceiling. You have it very badly indeed, he said to no one in particular. He picked up his pen again. It was the 4th day. Mabel Cartwright had not seen Evadne since Tuesday. The scones, the corner place, the conversation about everything except the things Evadne was not talking about. And by Saturday morning, the particular unease of a woman who knows her friend well enough to know when something is wrong had become impossible to ignore. She knocked on the door of the 2 small rooms at 10:30. Evadne opened it. Mabel looked at her face. Right, said Mabel. I am coming in. She came in. She sat down in the small chair by the window without being asked, in the way of someone who has known a person long enough to know where to sit. She looked at Evadne. Evadne looked at her hands. "Tell me," said Mabel. "It is—" Evadne started. Stopped. "It is complicated, Mabel." "I have time," said Mabel. Evadne looked at the window. She looked at her hands. She looked at Mabel's face. Warm, steady, the particular patience of a woman who had sat with her through enough difficult things to know that the difficult thing always came out eventually, and that rushing it never helped. And then she told her, not as a story, not laid out with beginning and middle and end and all the details in the right order. The way you tell something when you have been carrying it alone for too long, and the weight of it has made the shape of it strange. In pieces, out of order, the important things arriving before the context, and the context arriving after the important things. And Mabel sitting through all of it without interrupting, because she could tell that interrupting was not what was needed. She told her about Sebastian's offer, and what she had done and why. About the weeks of carrying it. About the boardroom and what she had said and what he had said, and the unfinished sentence in the car waiting downstairs. She did not tell it as something that had happened to her. She told it as something she had done. That was the difference. Every time she came close to something tender, the connecting door, the warmth of those last weeks, the Tuesday night, the laughter. She moved through it quickly. Not because it did not matter. Because it mattered too much to lay out in front of anyone, even Mabel, even now. What she could not move through quickly was the end of it. "I told him the truth," she said, "and he sent me home. And I deserved it. I knew I would deserve it, and I told him anyway, and I still... She stopped. Her hands were very still in her lap. "I still cannot make myself sorry I told him," she said. "That is the terrible part. I'm sorry for all of it, for Abernathy, for the lie, for all of it. But telling him, I cannot be sorry for that." Mabel sat very still through all of it, her expression moving through several things in sequence, then settling into the particular stillness of a woman who has just been handed more information than she was prepared for and is taking a moment to arrange it properly. "I need," she said. "Yes." "I need a glass of water." "Yes." Evadne got her water. Mabel drank it. She set the glass down carefully. She looked at her friend. "You love him," she said. Not a question. Not surprised exactly. The tone of a woman who is naming something she can see clearly and wants to make sure they are both looking at the same thing. Evadne started. "Evadne." The silence lasted exactly long enough. "Yes," said Evadne, very quietly. "Yes, I do." Mabel said nothing for a moment. Then she got up from the small chair and sat beside her on the narrow settee and put her arm around her friend's shoulders with the particular warmth of a woman who does not have the words and knows the arm matters more than the words anyway. "Oh, my poor friend," she said. "I did it to myself," said Evadne. "Yes," said Mabel gently. "But you also told the truth, when it cost you everything." "It did not help." "Not yet," said Mabel. They sat together in the quiet of the two small rooms. Outside, the aunt moved through the house, her father's voice somewhere in the distance. The ordinary sounds of a Saturday morning that had no idea what was happening in this small sitting room. "I keep thinking," Evadne said. She stopped. "What?" "I keep thinking about his face," she said. "When I told him, he went so still, and I thought I knew what still looked like on him. I'd been watching that face for weeks, and I thought I knew every kind of still it could do." She pressed her lips together. That was a different one. Mabel said nothing. "That was the kind of still that happens when something breaks," said Evadne. "Not anger. Something quieter than anger. And I did that. I put that on his face." "You also put other things on his face," said Mabel carefully. Before that. That does not. I know it does not fix it, said Mabel. I'm not saying it fixes it. I'm saying it was real. What happened before? Whatever it was real. Evadne looked at her hands. He will not come before the 4 weeks, she said. That is not who he is. No, it is not. And after, you walk through that door and you hold your head up. Because you told the truth and it cost you everything and you would do it again. And whatever happens after that. She tightened her arm around her friend's shoulders. Whatever happens, you will not have any more lies to carry. Evadne looked at the window. The London Saturday pressing grey and ordinary against the glass. He laughed, Mabel, very quietly. Not bragging, not performing. The way you say something that has no one left to say it to and needs to be said out loud just once before you put it away. Properly. Like he had been saving it up for a very long time. Mabel held her friend and said nothing. Because some things do not need an answer. They just need someone to sit with them. The note came through the head clerk on a Tuesday morning. Miss Cartwright was to come to Mr. Thorne's office at 11 o'clock. The matter concerned a commendation for her work on the Pemberton account and a matter of some reward for same. Mabel read the note at her desk. She read it again. She straightened her hat. She went upstairs at 11 o'clock. His office was exactly as she had imagined it from everything she had not been told and had pieced together anyway from the particular quality of Evadne's silences when certain things came up in conversation. Dark panelling, brass fittings, the tall windows with the grey London light pressing through them, the connecting door standing open on the other side of which sat an empty desk with a pen in its place and a ledger closed and a teacup on the corner that had clearly not been touched. She sat down in the chair across from him. He looked up, the grey eyes, the close-kept beard, the expression of a man conducting a professional meeting with complete composure. She had heard about those grey eyes from a small sitting room on a Saturday morning. They looked considerably more tired in person. Miss Cartwright, he said, thank you for coming. Of course, Mr. Thorne. I've been reviewing the work on the Pemberton account, he said. Your contribution to the ground floor filing was thorough, more thorough than was strictly required. He opened a drawer. I like to acknowledge that when I see it. He placed 2 tickets on the desk between them. Mabel looked at them. She looked at him. The Royal Opera House, he said. I understand there are rehearsals beginning next week. I thought, oh, said Mabel. She said it the way a person says something when the breath has gone out of them unexpectedly, and the word is all that comes out in its place. Oh, my goodness. She looked at the tickets with the expression of a woman who has wanted something for long enough that the actual arrival of it requires a moment of adjustment. I have always wanted, she started. That is, this is, Evadne always said it was the most extraordinary place. She said there was nothing like it in all of London, and I always thought one day I would. And now, she stopped. She picked up the tickets and held them with the careful reverence of someone handling something that might disappear if gripped too firmly. My aunt will be there, you know. She has been helping with the preparation for the new season. She said I could come along and see the rehearsals. And now I have tickets as well. Proper tickets. And Evadne may come too, as her aunt knows my aunt, and she was going to help with the preparation, and she looked up. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. He was looking at her with the particular expression of a man who is listening to something with considerably more attention than the surface of it requires. Not at all, he said. It is only, Mabel pressed on, still in the warm, unstoppable current of her own excitement. Evadne always said her one regret about that night was that she went alone. October it was. Your father was so kind to give her the ticket. He has always done that for the staff, I understand. And she went alone, and she said it was the most... Well, she never quite finished saying what it was. Only that she wished she had not been alone. She looked at the tickets in her hands. And now we will go together. What a thing. He said nothing. My father, he said after a moment. Very carefully. He has always done that. Given tickets to the staff. Oh, yes, said Mabel cheerfully. From what I understand, he has done it for years. A small gesture for work well done. Evadne was the lucky one last October. Yes, he said, very quietly. She was? Mabel looked up from the tickets. Something in his voice had changed. Not dramatically, the way a room changes when a window is opened somewhere. The same room, the same light, but the quality of the air entirely different. His expression was doing something she could not entirely read. She looked at the connecting door. She looked at the teacup on the corner of the empty desk. She looked back at him, and she understood, not all of it, not the full shape of it, but enough, that she had just handed him something in her excitement that she had not known she was carrying. "Miss Cartwright," he said, his voice entirely even now, the composure fully back. "That will be all. Enjoy the rehearsals." "Yes, sir." She stood. She held the tickets carefully. "Thank you, sir. Truly." She went to the door. She stopped. She did not turn around. She went out. She closed the door behind her. Behind the closed door, Reginald Thorne sat very still. October, the Opera House, his father's ticket in the hand of a woman who had walked into his building a day later with ink on her right finger and rose water and mint and the particular careful composure of someone holding everything together with both hands. He put his hand in his waistcoat pocket. The locket was there. It was always there. The broken chain, the small, warm weight of it that he had carried since October without knowing whose it was and had been carrying since a number of weeks ago, knowing exactly whose it was, and not knowing what to do with that knowledge because the knowing had arrived at the same time as everything else, and everything else had been considerable. He took it out. He held it in his palm. He looked at it for a long time. She went alone, he thought. She went alone, and she lost this, and he had been carrying it ever since, and she had been 12 feet away from him every single working day since, and had been looking for her phantom the whole time without knowing she had already found him. And he had been looking for her, and she had been there, right there, the connecting door that had never closed fully, the tea at 7:30, the grandmother who did not live to 100, the Chesterfield and Dull Head and a motor car sitting at the curb, not moving, all of it. Every single morning of it. Her. It had always been her. He closed his hand around the locket. "I know where you are," he said quietly. To the empty desk, to the teacup on the corner, to the pen in its place and the ledger closed, in the particular silence of a room that was missing something it had not known it needed until it was gone. He put the locket back in his pocket. He sat for a long time without moving. Then he picked up his pen. He began to work. 14 days. Said his mind. He pressed his pen to the paper. 14 days.
Not a name, not yet a face. Only
While Reginald sat in his office with his plan and his knowledge, Evadne sat on the narrow settee with her hands in her lap and the empty water glass on the small table and the sound of her aunt moving somewhere in the house and her father's voice low and comfortable in the distance. She sat with it for a while, all of it, the boardroom, the unfinished sentence, the car waiting downstairs, the teacup that Mabel said was still being ordered every morning for an empty desk. She pressed her hands flat on her knees. She had been sitting with Reginald Thorne for 2 weeks now, in this room, in her mind, in the particular silence of 2 small rooms that had no connecting door and no brass lamp and no tall windows with rain moving against them. She had been sitting with the unfinished sentence and the dry swallow and the "please turn your face away from me," and she was tired. Not angry, not bitter, just tired. The kind of tired that arrives when you have been carrying something with both hands for long enough that your arms have forgotten what it felt like not to be carrying it. She was going to put it down. Not today, not all at once, but she was going to start. She looked at the window, and then, quietly, the way things arrive when you are not looking directly at them, she thought about October, not about Reginald, not about the connecting door or the 4 weeks or any of it, about the alcove, about 30 seconds in the dark that had nothing to do with signatures or ledgers or Sebastian's plan or any of the complicated tangled weight of the past weeks. 30 seconds that had belonged entirely to themselves. A stranger who had held her in the dark and asked nothing of her and known nothing about her and expected nothing from her. Her phantom. She had not thought about him properly in weeks. He had been pushed to the back by everything else. The connecting door, the investigation, the interrogation, the Chesterfield, all of it, and she had almost forgotten that he existed. That there had been a moment before all of this when something had happened to her that was entirely clean and entirely uncomplicated and entirely hers. Her first kiss. A man she had never seen. A man who did not know her name or her father's medicine or the rejection letters in her drawer or any single thing about her, except that she was standing in a dark alcove in October and so was he. She thought, a man like that, a feeling like that, simple, unknown, untouched by everything. That was what she wanted. Not the weight of Reginald Thorne and all that had happened between them. Not the connecting door and the warmth and the loss of it all in a boardroom on a Thursday afternoon. Her phantom. She almost laughed at herself. She was lying in a first dream and she knew it. A man she had never properly seen. A man she had known for 30 seconds. A man who would never, in all probability, be what her imagination had made him, would never be forgivable in the assumptions she had built around him. And yet, he had held her and asked nothing. And that, in this particular moment in these two small rooms with her hands flat on her knees and the weight of everything pressing down, felt like the most extraordinary thing anyone had ever done. She thought about Mabel's aunt at the opera house, the rehearsals, the invitation still sitting there waiting. She was going to go, not to find him. She was not so lost in her own dreaming as to think she was going to find a stranger from October in a building full of singers and musicians and her friend's aunt with her mop and her opinions. She was going to go to stand in the place where something had begun and breathe it in and let herself have it one more time before she put it away, for good, to remember the feeling, to find some comfort in it, to stand in the alcove in the dark and be, just for a moment, the girl from October who did not yet know about signatures or boardrooms or unfinished sentences. Just that, just once, and then she would come back. And when the 4 weeks were done, she would walk through that connecting door with her spine straight and her figures correct and her face composed, and she would be professional, precise, exactly what she was supposed to be. But first, the opera house, her phantom, one last time. Mabel's aunt was a small, efficient woman who moved through the Royal Opera House with the proprietary confidence of someone who had been cleaning important buildings her entire life and had decided, some years ago, that important buildings were much the same as unimportant ones, and the main difference was the curtains. She put them both to work immediately upon arrival. Mabel did not mind. She was inside the Royal Opera House for the first time in her life, and she would have polished every surface in it with her own coat if asked. She moved through the corridors with her eyes going everywhere. The gilded plasterwork, the velvet, the vast chandelier catching the rehearsal lights and throwing them back in pieces, with the expression of a woman who is trying to look at everything at once and succeeding at none of it and not caring in the slightest. Evadne worked beside her for an hour. Then, "I'm going to look around a little," she said, "if your aunt does not mind." "She will not notice," said Mabel, who was currently standing with her head tipped back looking at the ceiling with the transported expression of someone having a private religious experience. "Go." Evadne went. She found the stairs without difficulty. She found the upper corridor with its low light and its velvet quiet. She found the alcove. It was exactly as she remembered it, the particular darkness of it, the way the light from the chandelier far below reached it only as a suggestion, a warmth at the edges, a gilded plasterwork detail caught briefly and then dark again. The sounds of the rehearsal drifting up from below, distant and beautiful, the orchestra finding its way through something new. She stood in it. She breathed. October, she thought. Just this, just the feeling of it, the warmth and the dark and the 30 seconds that had belonged entirely to themselves. She let herself have it, let herself stand in it without the weight of everything that had come after. Just the alcove, just the dark, just the memory of a man she had never seen who had held her and asked nothing. Her phantom. She closed her eyes. The rehearsal lights shifted below for some new arrangement the orchestra was working through. The warm glow at the edges of the alcove faded. The dark deepened. She stood in it. She breathed, and then footsteps. She did not open her eyes immediately. She thought it was Mabel. She thought it was Mabel's aunt. She thought it was someone from the rehearsal looking for a quiet corner. And then she felt the particular displacement of air that happens when someone tall enters a small space, the warmth of another person close, the dark pressing in around both of them. She opened her eyes. She could not see his face. She could not see anything, only the shape of him, tall, still, the particular stillness of someone who has come to a place deliberately and has arrived at what they came for and is not moving. And then, cedar, Salt air. The smell of it arriving before everything else the way it always did. Before thought, before reason, before any of the sensible parts of her that would have said something careful and correct if they had been given the chance. Her breath stopped. Her phantom. He was here. He had come back. She did not think. She could not think. She was the girl from October again. Just that. Just the alcove and the dark and 30 seconds that belonged entirely to themselves, and when he stepped toward her and his arms came around her, she did not move away. She could not see his face. She did not need to. Cedar, salt air, the height of him, the warmth, the particular certainty of arms that had found what they were looking for and had no interest in letting go. He held her, and she let herself be held. And for one long suspended moment in the dark of the upper alcove of the Royal Opera House, the girl from October and the phantom from October found each other again in the same place they had lost each other, and neither of them said a word, and neither of them moved, and the orchestra below played something new and beautiful into the dark. And then he kissed her, and she kissed him back, and it was not 30 seconds this time. When it ended, neither of them moved immediately. The dark around them, the distant orchestra, the gilded plasterwork catching the faint edge of light from somewhere far below. And then his voice, low, quiet, carrying the particular dry certainty of a man who has assessed a situation and arrived at the only logical conclusion available. "I think," he said, "that we are now both thoroughly ruined, so you will have to marry me." She went completely still. The voice, that voice. She knew that voice. She knew every register of that voice, the professional voice, and the Ice King voice, and the almost laugh voice, and the voice that had gone tight at the edges in an interrogation room and said shh and meant it, and the voice that had said beginning to and could not finish. She knew that voice, Mr. Thorne. It came out as barely a sound, a breath with his name in it. I don't understand. How could it be that you—" He was quiet for a moment. "What?" he said softly. "That I am your phantom. Is that what you called me?" She could not speak. "How?" she started. "How did you know to come here? How did you know that word?" "Mabel," he said. "Mabel. She saw me arrive downstairs tonight." A pause. "She told me you were up here, looking for your phantom." Another pause. Those were her exact words. The silence that followed had a very particular quality. "Of course she did," said Evadne, very quietly, into the dark. "Of course she did." He said nothing. She could feel him looking at her, even in the dark, the full, complete attention of a man who, when he finally looked at you entirely. "And you knew," she said, "about October, about the alcove. How long?" "A few days ago," he said. "Mabel, in my office. She mentioned your name and the opera house and October, and—" He stopped, and I knew, just from that. "I had been carrying something since October," he said quietly. That helped. The rehearsal lights shifted again below. The warm glow returned slowly to the edges of the alcove. Slowly, gently, the dark lifting just enough. They looked at each other. She looked, he thought, exactly like a child who has just stolen something and been caught and cannot decide whether the thing was worth it. He looked at her for a long moment, and then, for the first time, properly, completely, with nothing held back and nothing managed, he smiled. Not the almost smile, not the lines at the corners of his eyes while the rest of his face maintained its composure. The real one, the one that changed his face entirely. She pressed her hand over her mouth. "How long did you know?" she said, her voice arriving slightly unsteadily from somewhere behind her hand. "About October. A few days ago," he said. "About everything else." The smile settling into something quieter and more certain. Considerably longer than that. She lowered her hand slowly. He reached into his waistcoat pocket. He held out his hand. The locket lay in his palm, the broken chain, the small warm weight of it catching the faint light from below. "I believe," he said quietly, "that this is yours." She looked at the locket. She looked at his face. She looked at the locket again. She reached out and took it from his hand, the tips of her fingers brushing his palm. She held it in both hands and looked at it and said nothing for a long moment. "You have been carrying this since October," she said. "Yes. All this time." "Yes." She closed her fingers around it. She looked up at him. "Mr. Thorne." "Reginald," he said. She looked at him. "I think," he said, that after October and a connecting door and a locked building and a grandmother who did not live to 100, you can call me Reginald. Something happened in her eyes. I lied to you, she said, not avoiding it, not softening it, putting it on the floor between them the way she had put it on the floor of the boardroom, directly, completely, at full cost. I knew what I was doing and I did it anyway, and I'm sorry. I will always be sorry. I know, he said. You don't really forgive lies, she said. That is what Sebastian said. That is what I believed. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he stepped toward her. He put his arms around her. Not the desperate, tender embrace of the interrogation. Not the careful, managed comfort of a man who had found someone on his floor and could not bear it. Something quieter than both of those. The embrace of a man who has walked across a distance that had nothing to do with the space between two people, and everything to do with the space between who you were told to be and who you actually are. He held her. She let him. I have learned something, he said quietly, into her hair, his voice doing that thing at the edges that she had first heard in an interrogation room and had never forgotten. In these past weeks, she waited. The people worth keeping, he said, are not the ones who never make mistakes. A pause. They are the ones who cannot live with having made them. The orchestra below moved into something new, something that climbed and swelled and filled the vast space of the opera house, from the pit to the gilded ceiling, and drifted up through the floors and found its way, as music always finds its way, into the small dark spaces where people are standing very still, holding things they thought they had lost. She pressed her face against his chest. Cedar, salt air, her phantom, her Reginald. I went to my knees for you, she said quietly. In your office. Do you remember? I remember everything, he said. And you came down to the floor? Yes, you did not have to do that. No, he said. I did not. She felt his arms tighten slightly around her. I find, he said, that there are a number of things I did not have to do, and did anyway. She smiled into his chest. Below them, the orchestra played. Above them, the gilded ceiling of the Royal Opera House caught the light and held it. And in the alcove where it had all begun, two people stood in the dark that was not quite dark anymore, and did not move for a very long time.
For so long I walked alone, through rooms that felt the same, every face a passing shadow, every day unnamed.
Yet somewhere in the quiet air, a turning had begun, like the world was slowly moving towards someone.
I had learned to stand in silence, but the hours passed me by, building walls of careful distance. No one questioned why.
And one moment changed the air in ways I never knew, like the quiet of the world was leading me to you.
Was it chance or something deeper,
drawing every step we knew?
Was the silence only waiting to reveal the truth?
And the night is not so lonely, now the quiet holds your name.
Every shadow in the darkness feels a little less the same.
And every dream and every promise spoken loudly into you.
Only this unspoken knowing,
I was always meant for you. All the years I thought were empty,
were only space and time,
for a single turning moment
where your life met mine.
all the silence that surrounded every road I wandered through.
Was was a quiet hand that led me
step by step to you. If the world should turn tomorrow
and the light began anew,
still the hush between two heartbeats will remember you. Then the night is not so lonely, now the quiet holds your name.
every shadow in the darkness
Feels a little less the same. Not a promise lightly spoken, not a vow the world must see.
only this calm understanding.
You are where my heart can be.
In the hush between the lights,
It's where the dark ones grew. Something waited in the silence until